Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all having an amazing day, evening, night, whatever time you're watching this. I have got my May reading wrap up for you, so let's dive into what I read this past month, because it's now June. How is it June? Everyone says this. How is it halfway through the year? Oh my god. So in May this year, I read 2 physical books, 2 audiobooks and 1 ebook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through them in the order that I read them. So I started off the month by finishing 2 audiobooks pretty close to each other. So the first one that I finished was Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Oh gosh, I'm rubbish with names. And I gave this a 4.5 stars. This book is so, like, it has so many mixed reviews about it. Some people hate it, like, and then some people rave about it. I'm personally in the category that loved it. Now, I don't think this book necessarily does anything life-changing or anything groundbreaking in the sci-fi genre. I'm not a particularly big sci-fi reader, but I have quite a good understanding of it. Especially, I like sci-fi TV shows and films, but books sometimes don't always come across well with me. I think it's like the technical jargon that kind of puts me off sometimes. But I do dabble in sci-fi, and for even a kind of novice, intermediate level sci-fi person, I was like, yeah, this has been done before, you know, in various shapes and forms. However, what I really loved about it was how much the author was able to capture and put onto the page the intricacies of human nature and human interaction. I thought that was something that made this book really special, and I think it kind of made it readable for those who are not heavily into sci-fi. I think this is it. I think it's the fact that, you know, it is a sci-fi book, but there are so many other elements to it which make, you know, kind of bleeds it into different genres, if that makes sense. I also absolutely loved our main character of Clara. I just thought she was just so well done. Her observation of us, but also how her own thoughts were coming through, even as an android. And I think as well, I quite liked her innocence, like the way that she looked at humans and looked at the world was such a fresh approach and such a heartwarming approach, which I think some people don't, they forget about, you know, when we're going in our day-to-day lives. She was able to kind of really look at the other characters from an outsider's point of view and look at them in a way that we might not always look at other people, if that makes sense. The only reason why I knocked off half a star was I did find the ending was a bit flat and anticlimactic, especially kind of, there's not like a huge build up or anything, but I do feel like it did break my heart slightly. Just the ending didn't kind of follow suit with where the book had been going in terms of, you know, what we were working towards. The next book, which was an audiobook as well, was The Art Thief by Michael Finkel. This is a non-fiction book, and just completely randomly I had it on like a list of books I wanted to read just for like various book clubs. This was on as an audiobook, and I was like, I'll give it a go. I had no idea about anything about it apart from the title going into it and the fact it was non-fiction. So it was a complete and utter surprise. However, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. So this is about an art thief who got away with a lot of thefts. They just flew under the radar. I'm trying to get the name of it. It's like a really cool name. Bright Visa, that's it. I remember now from the audiobook. That's the one thing about audiobooks, I now know how to say a lot of the names, which is great. Stefan Bright Visa is essentially the world's most prolific art thief. He stole, I think it was like in the hundreds. He just essentially went around, like over the span of 8 years, he went round and, here we go, 200 heists. Insane. Just went round and just stole random bits and bobs from all over Europe and got away with it. And it essentially tells the story of his life as such, but from a really interesting point of view, because I think he has commissioned people to do like biographies of his life, but I don't think this one was. And like also looking at like the psychology behind it, and you know, why people steal, and the psychologist that also looked at Bright Visa as well. I think that was really interesting. It was one of those things where it does say like, it seems like it could be a work of fiction, but it's not, it's actually real. Okay, now we're on to the actual physical books. So the next book that I read is a book that I feel like is going to stay with me for a long while, and that is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. This book is like, it wasn't my most highly, it wasn't like a 5-star read, but it really stays with me, this book and this world. Essentially, it's about two characters who are living their life in and around the library, and essentially how their paths end up crossing. There's time travel in this. It's kind of like sci-fi-esque as well. The time travel element I think is really, really cool. And the library is essentially like a world itself. And I think that's what's really interesting in this, is that it is essentially it's a world. I just loved the world building in this, was amazing. It kind of, I've not read Dune, so obviously don't come for me if this is not right, but it gave me kind of like Dune vibes in terms of kind of, you know, the surroundings and kind of what's going on as well. But then there were many elements to it which were completely unique. I think this is why I love this so much, is this world is unlike any other world I've ever read before. I love books about books anyway, but it just took it to a whole other level, which I thought was amazing. So there's some pretty dark bits in it as well, and it is, I think it's about 600 pages, about 566 pages. I really enjoyed every minute. I didn't feel like reading this was a chore, which some big books can feel like. I'm currently reading The Burning Chambers, and that's about 600 pages, but that reads really quickly, I'm finding. And it was a similar thing with this. I mean, this took me probably about maybe 2 to 3 weeks to read. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I have the sequel. I ordered it pretty much straight away as soon as I finished this. Yeah, I gave this a 4.5 stars. The only thing that kind of took this down for me a bit was the fact that I found some of it a little bit confusing, especially kind of in the last fifth of the book. There were some points and I was like, what's going on? There were some things that I clocked early on, which were clues for later on, which I did not mind guessing whatsoever because they were really cool reveals. Even though it wasn't a hugely highly rated book, this could be one of my favourite books of the year. I mean, I'd love to get to the second book this year. I might do, you just never really know with me. I was really hoping to then have another book after The Book That Wouldn't Burn, which was a strong read, and I lucked out so well. I read Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I don't know if I said that right, I'm so sorry. I get the hype, guys. I understand the hype. Time travel again. I was obviously in a time traveling phase with both of these books. So utterly charming. I loved the characters. I love the fact that we focus quite a lot of the characters in the cafe. I think it would have been kind of, I think it really helped me really invest in those characters. And I haven't read too much about the other books because I don't want to really spoil it. But oh my god, this is so heartbreaking. I didn't cry, but it definitely broke my heart in certain points. It's got so much character to it. And again, it's like sci-fi, but very readable in terms of time travel-esque. It just gave me all the cozy vibes as well, like being set in the cafe and kind of the pace of it as well. 5 stars, utterly heartbreaking. Love it. Went out and bought the second book literally within the next couple of days after I finished this. And then the last book that I read, I think for some reason I was just kind of going on vibes. This was a very vibey month, so I ended up reaching for books that were a similar vibe or a similar genre or like element to the book I'd read before. I read another non-fiction book, and that doesn't normally happen within 1 month that I read 2 non-fiction books. I read the ebook of Ikigai by Hector Garcia and Francesc Morales. This is a really interesting non-fiction book, essentially about the Japanese way of living a long and happy life. And it was one that had been on my Kindle for ages, and I just felt in the mood, so I picked it up and it was great. It was a 5-star read. I didn't expect to love it as much as I had, especially as I'd read the Little Book of Hygge in January, which was kind of like, you know, ways of living by a certain, you know, culture, and I didn't get on with it. And so I actually kind of was a bit apprehensive going into it, but I was like, yeah, let's give it a go. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I found it really interesting. I didn't feel like anything was filler, which I'd felt with that other book. Really interesting takeaways from it, ones that I was like, I really want to implement into my life, and that I've already started to implement. And I feel like it's one that I would want to get and refer back to, or just read again and again, because I think that it's a really good refresher for the mind of, you know, how to be living and looking after ourselves, but enjoying it at the same time. Also as well, finding out about all of these people who have lived to like their 80s, their 90s, into their hundreds, was so interesting as well. I also found this just a really gentle read, which for non-fiction sometimes means if it's a gentle read it could be boring, but I didn't find this boring at all. So again, really enjoyed it. Ended the month on a high, which we like to hear. So yeah, those are the books that I read in May. I wanted to kind of add this on the end actually, because obviously you get to kind of see what I read in a month. I put my TBRs on my TikTok, so if you want to go and follow me on there, please do. That's where I kind of post my hopeful TBR for the month. But I wanted to actually see how many books I'd read on that TBR. So let's go and have a little look, and I will talk through the books that I wanted to read in May and what I actually read. Okay, so these are the books that I wanted to read. These are, bearing in mind, these are the physical books I wanted to read. I haven't really done one for like ebooks or audiobooks or anything like that, because I have a lot of books and I want to try and make a dent in my actual physically owned books that I haven't read yet. So these are the books that I wanted to read. Before the Coffee Gets Cold, tick, amazing. I wanted to reread and annotate The Handmaid's Tale, which I didn't get to in May, but I have been getting to this month, so that's great. Peach Blossom Spring, which I did start in May, but I finished in June, so we'll talk about that in next month's wrap up. The Binding, I didn't get to that. The Warm Hands of Ghosts, I didn't get to that. And A Court of Mist and Fury, didn't get to that. And Yellowface, didn't get to that. So I got 2 out of those. Hey ho. I do find it really hilarious kind of when I do look back at these things. So I might try and start to do that, like looking at what I actually read and what I was planning on reading. If you like that element and you want me to do it in next month's video, let me know, and I definitely will. This month, I'm doing pretty well so far, but we'll see for next month. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up, comment down below what you read in May, and I will see you in my next video. Mwah. Bye.